Now when I mention the word superhero, you guys will probably have a certain image in your mind. Most likely the Marvel and DC comics will show up, but it's interesting to see how superheroes have become part and parcel in the modern world, as we seem to have this fascination with people who have the abilities beyond our understanding, which lead them to being labelled super or even godlike. Now there are a lot of videos that look into the rise of superheroes, which each have their own merit, but I always found it fascinating how this obsession has evolved over time. I mean, we still love the hero, but recent media has shown that there's more to superheroes than the standard men in tights. And I really like this because as someone who suffered from Marvel fatigue many years ago, it wasn't until I read The Watchmen where I realised there's a lot more you can do with this. And you may have noticed from all that B-roll that those were all Western productions, so you have to ask yourself, does this exist in Japan or the Japanese medium? Yeah, obviously we have the oldies like Astro Boy and Ultraman. I mean, his name ends in man for God's sake. But all of these guys are shown to be a force against evil. We can stand behind them and rely on them as they themselves are superheroes. But is there a Japanese medium that shows a superhero in a different light? One that portrays a superhero not as a force of good and evil, but as something more ordinary, perhaps even human. Which leads me to Inuyashiki. Inuyashiki is a science fiction seinen anime released in 2017 by MAPPA Studios. You know, the people that made Attack on Titan, Jujutsu Kaisen, and this. And it's also written by Hiroi Oku. Now, if that name sounds familiar, you probably know him from being the creator of the Gantz series. Okay, I didn't realize Inuyashiki was made by the people who made Gantz, but knowing now, everything is starting to click in my head. In terms of the themes, the characters, and the violence. It all makes sense now. Anyway, unlike Gantz, which had a number of arcs the characters went through, Inuyashiki is a more contained story. Like most anime, it's only about 12 episodes long and doesn't really continue after that. I quite like this because as an older man, I find it really difficult to watch 100 episodes of this one series. So to watch a 12 episode series in 1 or 2 sittings is very much helpful. Okay, without further ado, let's get into Inuyashiki. Oh man, is this the main character? I'm sorry if I sound taken aback, but I'm just really surprised. Normally animes tend to typecast certain ages, and you normally see characters that are in their teens, and normally they're portrayed as the hero. And older characters are more portrayed as evil villains who get in the way or just out of touch from the current generation. Okay, except this guy. And this is surreal because normally anime tends to be targeted towards young adult males and females. I mean, why else are there a lot of schoolboys and schoolgirls in anime? And to make an older character a main character to an audience that can't relate to him is just not only alienating, but pretty ballsy, and I'm just really curious where it goes. But either way, I really love this intro. There's a sense of monotony and despair as we learn that our main character works a dead-end job and supporting a family that doesn't want anything to do with him. You'll also notice Inuyashiki doesn't talk whatsoever during the beginning, and most of the world is explained through action, since we gain so much visual information on who Inuyashiki is and how he reacts to the world around him. You feel Inuyashiki's pain as he's unable to say anything to his family who he's become distant to. This is really depressing since this guy isn't able to take a break and he can feel that he needs a form of release from his environment. In any case, after receiving some news of stomach cancer and not having the strength to tell his family, Inuyashiki runs to the park and weeps for the situation he is currently in. Well then, that just happened. That was so out of nowhere and I like it. Honestly, like it's so interesting because you think it's going to be this real world anime, but then it just kind of breaks down and becomes a sci-fi calamity. I love it when genres do this and it's so good, and I can't wait to see where it goes next.
It seems the aliens have accidentally killed Inuyashiki and this other guy, and instead of staying, they decide to clean up and get the heck out of Dodge. Really? You're gonna give these guys your weapons? This just reminds me of Tokyo Ghoul when the doctor decides to transplant Risei's organs into Kaneki. But at least there, the doctor didn't know about Risei being a ghoul. Here, it just seems like these guys are just being idiots. In any case, Inuyashiki wakes up from his sleep and realizes things are a bit different. With the cancer gone and being in a lot of better shape, it isn't long till we see the extent of the repair. And soon enough, Inuyashiki's boring life is soon turned upside down.
If that was just the first episode, and I'm so excited to see what is next, because the way it just builds the world in this, and then just smash it again to rebuild it into this sci-fi spaceship thing with robots, lasers, battles. Oh my god, such a good intro. So much props to the anime, to map it. You guys, good job.
I really need to talk about the transformation scene because it's absolutely fascinating. This was the moment where I really appreciated animation, since it does what a lot of anime does and have a mixture of 2D and 3D animation. I'm usually hit and miss with this, since the 3D animation makes everything look weird to me, especially when most of the animation is in one style. If the entire animation was 3D, then I don't have a problem with it, since I have time to get used to it. But if it's a mixture of 3D, then it just stands out like a sore thumb, which makes everything look weird. And I'm happy to say Inuyashiki's use of 3D is absolutely spot on. It really adds to the uncanny valley, as we see Inuyashiki act normal, despite his body being in an unusual state. And from the inside, there's literally nothing organic in him. Not even a human brain. Normally when you see a cyborg or a human robot thing, you would see a bit of human in them, like a blood or brain, which signifies that they're human. But Inuyashiki doesn't have that, and if we didn't know he was human before, we would think he was a robot.
This just makes me think then, because where does Inuyashiki end and where does the robot begin? It's so weird to see a consciousness being operated in this way, because where is it? Is it like code inside that brain of his? And if it is, then is Inuyashiki human?
Because of the aliens, we finally see what goodies Inuyashiki's new body has in store. He has lasers, super strength, and has access to every piece of technology on Earth. But interestingly, I found his reaction towards these powers more interesting than the powers themselves. Since in most superhero stories, you normally see the superhero being fairly young and muscly men and women. And while there is a learning curve, it doesn't take long for them to learn their powers. But you never see a character like Inuyashiki, who is the exact opposite of these superheroes. He's not fit, he's not young, and being an older man, he's unable to understand his abilities properly, and throughout the anime, he has to discover his powers either by testing it out, or by throwing himself into dangerous situations. Like, take this scene. Inuyashiki has learned that he has the capabilities to fly, however, he has no clue how to actually do it. So to figure it out, he thinks of an icon that can also fly. Which makes sense, since what better way to learn than imagine your heroes doing it, like Superman or Wonder Woman. However, Inuyashiki thinks of one specific icon, and that icon is none other than Ikiru Atom! Alright, take it easy there, old timer.
And this is what makes Inuyashiki different to everyone else. He's just a man, and an old one at that. But the way he goes about being a superhero is so different, in the sense that he's just an old person who has so much difficulty trying to figure out his powers. And he has to struggle throughout the entire anime to figure out how to get used to it.
But this works though, since Inuyashiki is constantly beaten down in the anime, having been ganged up by thugs constantly. He doesn't understand how to use his powers effectively, leading to a lot of Hail Mary moments. And even then, these moments come at a cost, since Inuyashiki's failure to save people weighs heavily on his mind. And this is just perfect. It's something I don't see often in media, let alone anime. A hero who struggles to be a hero because of his own disposition. We're being shown Inuyashiki's struggle to become a hero, and every time he's beaten down, every time he fails, we're on his shoulder screaming, "Come on, old man, you can do it!" But does Inuyashiki have the will to change and become a hero? We'll have to see, because the world this place is set in is by no means innocent. In fact, there's a lot of callbacks to a lot of stuff when it happens in the real world or the media. There were many times where I was like, yep, I know that. Now, there's the obvious stuff like the Gantz poster and other references to anime, but there's also the references of social media, and while it is a bit boomerish, it does show to highlight the toxic side of the internet. But there is stuff that will fly under the radar for some people, like this scene here where Inuyashiki is on the swing set, which is a reference to an old Japanese film called Ikiru. As a former film student, I watched a lot of Akira Kurosawa films, and Ikiru is one of my favourites. But Inuyashiki takes a lot of stuff from that film, since both film features an old main character, both suffer from stomach cancer, both have family that don't want anything to do with them. You can really see the homage this anime pays to Japanese films.
Honestly, I didn't expect to learn about Ikiru from this film, and it's been a few years since I watched it, but I still remember like the emotions I felt from that film and what I learned from it. Like, I know it's a bit cliche to say it, but Ikiru was the film that affected me the most throughout my time during film school. It's kind of funny because like, at the time, I had this idea that there shouldn't be happy endings in films because happy endings are unrealistic and too joyous, whereas life is the opposite of that. It's dark, depressing, and cruel. But Ikiru taught me something that I didn't expect, and that is that the world isn't happy-go-lucky or dark, depressing. There's a bit in between it, and that ending affected me deeply because it gave me something I didn't expect, and because of that I am not going to spoil the film for you, and I urge you all to watch it as soon as you can, after Inuyashiki of course. But anyway, I think that's my film school rant over, and we should probably get back to the plot of Inuyashiki. So
now, as the anime goes on, Inuyashiki will deal with a number of people who will harass the public, and these range from Japanese hoodlums to Yakuza members. And if I'm being honest with you guys, these guys aren't interesting. Cause like in Gantz O, these guys are a bit dickish and essentially here to be punching bags for Inuyashiki. So when the old man finally hits them, we're like, yeah, that's what you get, you piece of shit. And this works with small characters, but other times these bad guys tend to verge on cartoonish evil. Like this guy here. His basic MO is that he kidnaps women, drugs them, and does horrific stuff to them until they OD. If you think about villains that were interesting, then you know that all of them were more than just cartoonishly evil. They had interesting characterizations, whether it's a sympathetic origin tale, or we can empathize with them in their actions. A good villain is one that is both interesting in characterization and in action. This guy isn't that. He's very one note and only serves to strengthen Inuyashiki's motivation, as even by the end, when he gets his comeuppance, he's still an evil man to us. It's a bit disappointing to see Inuyashiki being put up against these villains, and I really hope the next guy isn't some egomaniacal bodybuilder with a micro. Oh. Now, if you remember from the beginning, Inuyashiki wasn't alone in the park. There was also this guy, and some of you may know him as the guy that went BAM! And he's basically the reason why I decided to watch this anime. So midway through the series, we're introduced to Hiro Shishigami, a high school boy who's anything but ordinary. We first see him visiting his friend Naoki Ando, who refuses to go to school due to being bullied. And Hiro, being a good friend, decides to check up on him. And while Inuyashiki freaked out at his new predicament, Hiro was surprisingly calm and collected at what just happened. Hell, he's even managed to master his powers a lot easier than Inuyashiki, since he's a younger man and a manga reader, so this stuff would come a lot easier to him. In any case, from the moment we meet Hiro, we already feel there's something wrong with him. The way he talks about killing and his disregard for life is very apparent. You can feel that there's something wrong with Hiro just from the way he talks, and when his friend suggests being a hero, his only reaction is,
めんどくさそうかな
okay, we're fucked. In any case, Hiro decides to go one step further and decides to visit the house of a student from his school for no reason.
Bam! 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 Bam!
Jesus, this is actually horrific. And I think this is what makes him stand out compared to the last guy. Because I know the last guy would be willing to kill an entire family if he wanted to. But the effect is different because if he did it, I would be angry that a man like him could do something like this and get away with it. But here I'm horrified because I'm aware of what Hiro can do and the fact that he does it with no emotion on his face, since it makes you question if he gets any enjoyment out of this or if he's doing it just because he can. And if things couldn't get any worse, this anime hits us with a reminder that this ain't no shonen.
That's not even evil. That's just monstrous.
But fortunately, Inuyashiki hears this and the two come face to face for the first time. And so the superhero meets the supervillain, and like a great man said, the villain is a direct opposite of the hero. Inuyashiki, the kind old man, while Hiro, the cold youngling. Brought together by a freak accident, this is the moment we've been waiting for. A battle that will end all... Oh, he's gone. Well, that's awkward.
Either way, we now know what Inuyashiki must do. But how can he stop him when he himself is powerless to save an entire family? Perhaps Inuyashiki must become a monster to kill one.
I guess we'll find out later, since halfway through the series, the narrative starts to switch perspectives as now we get a glimpse into Hiro's life. And from here, we see that despite Hiro being a villain, we see how normal he is compared to everyone else, as he too has a family who he loves dearly. This is so weird to see, but it hits home that even Hiro has people he cares about. And it really makes him stand out compared to other anime villains, since he has a backstory and we learn more about him. And he even gains a love interest who confesses his love to him out of nowhere. Although this girl isn't the best character, since she kind of falls into the I'm gonna fix you trope. But I get it. She's basically foiled to Hiro, as she's incredibly caring and endearing, which even surprises Hiro himself. And I don't mind that. In fact, I love a foil. But her personality and the way she reacts really puts me off, since I feel she's a bit deluded. And she's always by his side, even when the truth comes out. And this annoyed me more than it should, because I think it could have worked. It would have been nice to see Hiro slowly fall for her, without making her character delusional or weird. But in any case, it seems that she's had an effect, as Hiro decides then and there to stop killing people just like that.
It's interesting to see how this anime tries to make us empathize for Hiro and see what he has to deal with on a daily basis. But the weird thing is that despite this, I couldn't really empathize with Hiro the same way I do with Inuyashiki.
This guy's interested in his manga than anyone else. In fact, he found this girl's opinions on One Piece more interesting than the lives of her entire family. And granted, he does try to help people once he made his vow. But does this negate their misdeeds? Not really. Now, that's not to say I didn't feel anything for Hiro, because there are moments where I did. And not to go into spoilers, these moments made sense, as it was a way for Hiro to lash out on a world that stood there and did nothing as he was at his lowest point. But as a whole, I think the sequence is not meant to give us empathy to Hiro. Well, maybe a bit, but instead I think it's to give us insight into Hiro and have us challenge our preconceptions of this psychopath. Because like in reality, we're not who we think we are. I mean, what is a superhero but a guy in a costume? We see heroes as these unnatural beings with a personality. However, once the mask is off, they're basically any other person, are they not? And this exists everywhere we go. Since we all have our own different personas in life, we're not the same person who we are at work, the internet, or at school. We have our own personalities as we put ourselves out there as we wish to be the person we play to be. In case of superheroes, their identity with the mask or cowl is their true selves or who they wish to be. Like Bruce Wayne the billionaire, but put on a cowl and he's Batman the crime fighter. Or the main character in Persona 5, put on a mask and he's Joker the phantom thief. And in real world, we don't need to wear literal masks, and the same can be said for Inuyashiki and Hiro. As none of these guys wear masks, because the reality is, they're not some new hero. They're just people given powers they didn't ask for. And what we see here is a troubled teen who loves his family and friends very much. And when I started to think of the sequence in this way, I started to really get invested into the story. And Hiro was no longer a villain to me. He was a person, just like Inuyashiki.
And this is something that anime beats us over the head with constantly, as Hiro and Inuyashiki are connected in this very weird way. All the way from the OP we can see that connection come to light.
Like this scene here, where Inuyashiki is learning to use his powers to destroy this piece of rubble. We see how the scene is immediately cut with Hiro as he heals people, showing how the two are so different, yet so similar. I love seeing this in stories, and it really makes you wonder how this relationship will develop over time. The two characters are now destined for one another, but what does that destiny hold? Is it to reunite? To befriend? To destroy? Or to rule? Well, we'll have to find out later, and I hope you guys have a strong stomach for what's to come.
Bah!
Yeah, if you haven't guessed already, the story is really dark, and it showcases a lot of mature themes that even surprises me. Of course, a lot of shonen will explore the concepts of murder and violence, but it never goes to the level Inuyashiki does. I mean, we see people getting killed left and right here, from families to students. Even children aren't safe. I'm not kidding, there's literally a part where Hiro literally kills a few students. This would never fly in the States. And if this were remade into a live action TV series, and the filmmakers somehow managed to get this scene through cinemas, then you would bet the media would jump on it, calling it insensitive. Honestly, no anime has shocked me this much, and it really feels like no one is safe. Every time I see Hiro interact with someone, I get extremely worried because you never know what's gonna happen until he says that word. And I have to give this anime huge props, because personally, I think Hiro is the best villain I've seen in a long while. The decision for him to be indiscriminate in the people he kills was a ballsy move, but a genius one at that. The guy strikes fear into his enemies, and if for some reason you don't feel nervous seeing this guy, then you're not human. And as you can see from all this chaos in this B-roll, it seems Hiro hasn't stopped his killing, and it isn't long till Inuyashiki catches up to him and puts a stop to his monster. I mean, he can, right?
Well, if you guys know what time it is, then it's a spoiler section, so if you guys don't want to know any more about the anime and you want to watch it for yourself, then just skip to this point right here. But yeah, let's do this.
You remember when I said Hiro tries to turn a new leaf? Well, that doesn't go too well, as the police figures out who he is and Hiro flees his home. And this is just the start of his decline. Hiro is a killer and he needs to be stopped. And social media does its part to make Hiro's life worse, as soon after his family is harassed by the news who apologise for their son's actions. Unfortunately, this doesn't help at all, and Hiro's mother takes her life after being hounded by trolls. This sends Hiro into a fit of rage as he decides to lash out on the people that he feels are responsible for her death. But that isn't enough for him now. He wants everyone to suffer, so he goes on TV and unleashes his plan to kill as many people as he can, starting with today as he turns the entire population's phones against them. Meanwhile, Inuyashiki feels powerless as he is unable to do anything to stop this kid on a power trip. But with the help of Hiro's best friend, they manage to stop Hiro's killing spree. But unfortunately, he's killed too many. And the second day, despite Hiro's warnings, the people decide to continue their lives to show Hiro that they will not be bullied into fear. While that is nice, it doesn't stop Hiro from crashing every airplane he can find. Yeah, this would definitely not be remade. At this point, Inuyashiki has had enough, and when his daughter is trapped in a burning tower, he decides to save her, but the moment we've been waiting for is finally here. The two finally meet face to face again, and Hiro has only this to say.
俺が悪役でジジイがヒーローか。
With this realization, Hiro learns what he's become and decides to lash out against the old man for what he is. And the two engage in a fight that will put the most powerful beings to the test. And here we see Inuyashiki's training come a long way as he turns from an old man to a killing machine. And Jesus, I love this fight. This is the only time we'll see this, and I love it. The fact that this one big fight in the end is just glorious, and the animation is the best I've seen in a long time. Seeing how the bodies open up as they release their weapons is just so good. Damn it, this brings me back to what I said about Gantz and how it was a perfect action anime. There's so much tension in this scene, as Inuyashiki has to not only stop Hiro from his warpath, but also save his daughter, who is trapped in a building across the city. The fight is long and hard, but eventually Inuyashiki proves to be the victor, and he leaves Hiro for dead as he flies to save his daughter. But it seems like it's too late. We've seen what this anime is capable of, so we have no reason to believe she'll be saved, unless she has the plot armor, which she clearly has. You son of a... Inuyashiki has finally revealed himself to his family, and the shock of what's happened had soon faded away, along with the cold shoulder from the first episode. For the first time in a long while, Inuyashiki has felt love for his family, and he started to bond with each of them. It seems things are looking good for the Superman of this era, and there's nothing that can possibly...
We used all our power. In 3 days, giant asteroid will crash into the Earth. Mankind is being tested as to how it will spend the remaining time. The rest of you losers can go do whatever the hell you want.
Well, I should have known this would be too good to be true. In any case, Inuyashiki knows what he has to do, and he goes to destroy the asteroid before it collides with Earth. However, the mass is far too big, and Inuyashiki is unable to destroy it. But all of a sudden, Hiro turns up having survived his encounter. But instead of a rematch, Hiro understands what he has become, and his final action is to do something heroic. This is such an amazing send-off for Hiro, as at this point of the story, he's lost everything. His family, his friends, his girlfriend, anyone who could care for him was gone. And for any other person, this would be the last straw and could make someone an absolute monster. But Hiro, despite his flaws, realized that there's still people he cares about on this planet that shunned him. However, the destruction of the asteroid was not enough, and is still on a collision course, and with no other option left. Inuyashiki realizes what he must do.
That is one hell of an ending, and it really made me think about superheroes in general and what it would be like if we had a real life one. I've never really thought about this, to be honest with you, but it would be very scary if one day you just woke up to be one. Because, I mean, would you accept your existence or deny it? And even then, what will happen to you if you found out you've waken up and got these powers and figured out that you're not exactly human anymore? But yeah, like, this anime really blew my mind.
The two characters had embraced it, but they also understood that they were not human anymore, as anything that resembles that is all but gone. And so, what would happen if a human became something they're not? Would they become a hero like Inuyashiki, or a psychopath like Hiro? Here we have two sides of the same coin, as this anime loves to point out. And the ending is a good way to show what will happen if these characters stay the course. And to me, this is probably the most realistic case if we ever did have our own Superman. One can't live without the other, and as I said earlier, the two are fated for one another. And seeing how Inuyashiki develops over time to become this reality hero was amazing. As you saw from the final fight, the old man had become a hero, but he'd learned that despite that, he wasn't human anymore. Man, this anime was a wild ride. It did something that I don't see often in shows, and that is what intrigued me. Since when I think of amazing anime, I see that the best ones tend to do something different. That's not to say I only like that stuff in anime, since I have watched stuff that don't change the game and I still enjoy it. But I love how this anime does stuff that is so different that would take me by surprise every step of the journey. And I would like to see more of this stuff in the future. Okay, maybe not necessarily the violence, but I would like to see more perspectives and stories that take apart the genre. Like what Inuyashiki did for the superheroes.
And I'd like to see more varied perspectives rather than just the standard teenager who from school. I'd like to see more older characters, perhaps older women or different animals maybe. Okay, yeah, I want to see Beastar. Wow, it's such an amazing anime, and Inuyashiki is one hell of a character. He may have just been an old man for a lot of people, but to me, he was a hero.